Flory Bidunga is officially gone. He enters the transfer portal. This is disaster mode for KU. We discuss what went down and where they go from here.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Flory Bidunga is officially gone. Thank you for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks, and thank you for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We'll also touch on later on with Zack Clemens also leaving the program, and where do we kind of go from here for KU basketball? Again, you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts or on our YouTube page. And today's episode of the show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy, which maybe you need a little pick-me-up right now. I certainly do after some of this news. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from. Need one right now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. Stock up today and stay engaged with 5 Hour Energy. So we're going to get into the Flory Bidunga news. We're going to get into where does Kansas go from here, and then we'll finish up with a little on Zack Clemence, little ditty at the end as well on the show. So the news, I think Michael Swain posted about it. I know Mike Vernon was mentioning something about it this morning, and Swain posted the official news. The portal update has it. So this has become official now at this point with Flory entering the transfer portal. And there was news yesterday about Zach Clemence. I'd imagine there's going to be more players still to join the portal at this point in time for KU. But Flory is the biggest one, regardless of who even enters from this point, and was the biggest one that was going to be important for Bill Self to try to retain any way that you possibly could. Now, this is the one that, to me, I think hits hardest, and I'm sure I think a lot of KU fans are going to feel this way too, where in the portal era, as much as we've seen players come and go at a rapid pace, even for Kansas, and there have still been players that have left that you haven't wanted to, like, and certainly some of those are hindsight, like with Zuby Ejiofor, you didn't want him to leave at the time. You thought he showed some promise. You didn't know he was going to turn into what he did this year at St. John's, where it feels even worse. And there have been other players who have maybe left the program where maybe you understood or you were like, I wish he would have stayed. But, you know, at the end of the day, it felt like maybe you were bringing on a really good player back in the portal or something like that. This is the one where, bar none, I think you feel like a lot of probably other schools feel. And that's not a feeling that has typically been there for KU, because you typically are at the top of the food chain here with this stuff. And I still think in general, you are at the top of the food chain with some of this stuff as a blue blood in college basketball, but you haven't had to deal with this happening to you, really, right? Like, you haven't had to deal with the guy who is supposed to come back and break out to be, you know, all Big 12 next year and play 30 minutes per game as the starting center, and probably had a good offer on the table in terms of money and was supposed to come back and be a stud next year. You haven't had that guy leave for another school in the same way that these other schools are having ripped away. And I think it's a sad reality of where we're at, that, like, maybe this is a little bit of empathy for KU fans and how some of these other schools feel with them being fed up to schools like KU in a certain way. Now, I think, why would this go down? Because you have to get to a certain point, and why would Flory Bidunga transfer? Because typically when you see guys transferring out of the program, whatever program it is across the country, the two biggest reasons, one is money and two is opportunity. The opportunity that can be starting, that can be minutes played. And then I think that the third one, which this one doesn't as much apply to Kansas, it applies to Kansas more as a destination than why you would leave, is for guys looking to get a bigger opportunity in terms of, like, you know, playing at a bigger school, playing at a school that is going to give them a better opportunity to win a national title or make a Final Four or get, you know, drafted or get scouted or be on TV more often. That's not one that guys leave Kansas for, because you're not going to, you know, typically find a better destination than Kansas for those things. Then you look to the ones about money. Well, Kansas is as good off as any school in the country in terms of money and their NIL games. So I don't really buy that. Now, we'll get into something here that I want to mention here with, I think Flory is an outstanding kid. I do have some questions about the handlers, and maybe they wanted even more money than Bill Self was comfortable giving. And you know, there is a certain, as much as Kansas, you know, might have as much as anybody in the country, there still is a limit there. You know, it's not, we have $1 billion to use on the roster and we're going to only end up using 20. You know, it's like eventually there is a limit that's going to eat into other guys. So did it get to a point where it was so unheard of Then another school came calling and said, yeah, we'll pay that to the handlers, behind closed doors. And Kansas was like, listen, we'll give you more. We think you're going to be good next year, but this is the most we can give you. I don't know. I have a hard time believing that. I feel like Kansas would want him back and would match whatever number was needed to make that happen. But again, that's entirely possible. As far as the playing time thing, like, that can't be it, because if you're projecting the roster this year with Hunter Dickinson, KJ Adams gone, Flory was expected to be the starting center on this year's team. Whether they were going to play one big or two big basketball, he was expected to start. And I think anybody who would ask would say, okay, Flory would probably be expected to play somewhere between 25 and 30 minutes a game as a sophomore and be the stud on the team, right? And be the perfect complement as a big man to Darryn Peterson on the outside. And the other thing with this is, like, you look at it, and with Flory, it was, okay, well, did he not play as much as he wanted to this season? I mean, he played 16 minutes in a game on a team that he knew he was signing up to a roster that had two senior big men essentially coming back onto it. And really all the intel, all the talk from Flory's camp coming into joining Kansas was that he wanted to, he was comfortable developing. He was comfortable being in school for, 2-3 years and being that guy. And you still played 16 minutes. You still ended up starting some games this year. You played 17 in the NCAA tournament. You were playing closer to 20 minutes per game in Big 12 only games. It's almost like it was worse off that KJ got hurt, because it maybe it dangled the carrot of, oh, see, I can start. And then when KJ came back, you go back to the bench. And instead of it just being, oh, you stayed on the bench the whole way through, you had that carrot dangled in front of you. I don't know. That's entirely possible. But the fact that you were going to be the guy this upcoming season and you still had a big role on this team, maybe you thought you should have been playing more than KJ and the students chanting your name and stuff like that. But that should be more reason to want to come back this year, because then you are going to be playing that role and the fans love you, right? With them chanting the name. So I don't think it is that. So here's what this comes down to for me. It comes down to one of two things of why he would transfer away, because those things don't make sense. One of them is the shady handlers. And so how these handlers work is a lot of times, like, Flory obviously being from Africa at some point coming over to the United States to play, high school level basketball. You have people that get in on these things and are basically taking care of the kid for a few years. And, a lot of times they do give a lot of resources and effort into taking care of those kids and bringing them along to help them get to that next level. Sometimes they can get a little touchy-feely, and I do think there was a lot of drama in the Flory Bidunga recruitment to begin with. And I think Flory's a great kid. I think this is probably one of those situations where it's, hey, these people have more control on this than Flory might want, but he's just letting it happen because he's just doing his thing, being a 18, 19-year-old. And he's like, hey, you guys take care of me and I'll do my thing. Right. And so I think this is a little bit on the handlers. I think they are probably shady, a little bit corrupt. So that could be part of it too. Now, the other part of it, and this is the one where you have to look at yourself in the mirror here, is how much did Kansas not set up their own locker room? How much did this season, not just being a bad season, but being one where you had probably a lot of divisiveness in the locker room, and maybe Bill Self and the coaching staff, did they handle it to the A+ ability that they could? Did they handle this season as good as they could? Did they, how much noise was there from the players internally that, like, hey, Flory should be playing more and maybe Hunter and KJ, or one of the two, should be playing less, right? How much of it in the locker room became a thing of the seniors, the guys who have been here, versus the guys, coming into the program? How divisive did it get in the locker room, and how much did Bill Self let that, kind of rot away? And how much of a risk is that in bringing on transfers that aren't just going to, like, what if you bring in a transfer who's not just going to play well or is going to, cause problems with the locker room, but it's also going to, quote unquote, like infect other players, that it's going to make them feel, worse than it actually is. At some point, there is a little bit there too. And how much of that is just Flory saying, you know what, I want a fresh start somewhere else where it's not like as, chaotic as maybe it was in the locker room this year for KU. I think those are both the two reasons that I'm kind of looking at here, because the money, the playing time, the role, the star power of being on a team that's going to get you drafted, playing with a guy like Darryn Peterson, those things don't add up on why you would want to transfer. It has to be all relationship-based, handler-based, or locker room-based, or maybe a combination of the three. Those are the ones that kind of come about. So I guess the immediate follow-up here is what is the effect here on Darryn Peterson? What is the effect here on KU, both short-term and long-term? We'll get into that, and then a little bit of Zach Clemence at the end, too. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Nissan. We're all about the stats because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team, plus the gear, wherever you need to go. It's powered by twin-turbo V6 engine, delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. I bet you it can even handle the transfer portal. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. Take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more at nissanusa.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. You can pick your favorites, pick maybe somebody you think is going to win it all. You can pick an over-under. You can pick a player prop, right? Maybe you're not even about one of the teams. You just like one of the players. You want to pick them to have a double-double or score 20 points and have 5+ rebounds. You can do all that with FanDuel. It's easy and fast. The app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Sadly, we're running out of tournament games already, but there's plenty on action going on after that. You can bet on the Masters too. So FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks, making it your first listen every day. Don't forget to check out Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day too. We're talking Flory Bidunga transferring away. I think that college teams are going to have to start doing what and maybe they just wouldn't because they want to take the money, which I can't blame them for because it is a business to a certain standpoint. But the NFL started doing, and I forget if other sports started doing this too, but the NFL has that the jersey policy where it's if your player gets whatever, traded or cut or whatever, within a year or something like that you buy the jersey, you have the opportunity to exchange it for another jersey. I think that'd be cool if colleges started doing that, right? Because I just think there's probably a good amount of people that bought a Flory Bidunga jersey and they're probably sitting there going, man, can I exchange this for a Darryn Peterson next year? Or Marco Jackson, or I don't know, one of the transfers they're going to bring in, which they're clearly going to have to bring in a lot at this point in time. So where does Kansas go from here? What are the short and long-term repercussions of this? Well, the short-term repercussions is what effect does this have on Darryn Peterson and how does this affect building your roster? Let's start with Darryn Peterson. Peterson, obviously, at that event that he was playing in Haskell after one of the games, they asked him, what player are you most excited to play with on Kansas next year? His answer was Flory Bidunga. Is that a little bit scary that Flory is gone and that he might view it as hey, this is a vacant lot coming in that you've got here? Am I sure I want to go to Kansas? Is this really going to be the best destination for me? Is this really going to be the best place for me to set myself up to be the number one pick in the NBA draft next year? And those are all valid concerns. I do think that, Kansas has an opportunity and probably needs some quick commits in the portal to give him confidence to be hey, listen, we're going to take care of it. We've got this other guys around you. The other part of that is if you asked him, it is entirely possible that he was really looking forward to play with Flory. And I'm sure he was to a certain standpoint. It's also possible though, look at the potential returning roster for KU next year. It's a lot of guys are going to be transferring away, how many options did he really have to say? That could have just been a PR answer that he had to kind of say, who knows, right? But if he does have a big effect, you do have to, at the very least, try to calm the waters, so to speak, for your Bill Self and KU with the camp of Darryn Peterson and assure him that you're going to get some of these good transfers to build around the roster. Now, you can look at it from a perspective of what Duke did. Duke, obviously, in the Elite Eight and looking like an absolute beast around Cooper Flag right now. Duke last year basically intentionally cleaned house. I don't think this one was intentional for KU, but they intentionally cleaned house and were no, we're starting anew for Cooper Flag. He is that good. We're going to build around him, right? And so even guys like Jeremy Roach, who were productive college players and could have been a fifth-year senior or whatever he was this year, goes to Baylor. That was kind of a force out. Hey, we want to kind of start anew just around him and build it around him. There is one possibility that you can at least work it that way in the positive light where it's yeah, last year was such a mess start as new as possible here. And that is, maybe that ends up being a positive to work out of this. I don't really think this is a positive, but I don't know, trying to find a little bit of positive juice out of this. So the other short-term impact here is you're going to have to find transfer centers in the portal. I think already you were looking at having to bring on a backup big man, right? You were looking at somebody who would be comfortable playing like a Parker Brown role, somebody who would maybe even be comfortable just being kind of a practice big man. Maybe you're even looking for another big man who could be starter level, who could play the 4 and the 5 for you, right? This obviously puts more pressure on a guy like Bryson Tiller, right, who's coming off an injury and hasn't played in any practices for KU. That it's looking like right now Bryson Tiller would have to play a pretty big role on the team. Now we'll see where that lies when all is said and done in the transfer portal for KU, but that's really it for big man. I guess if you count Samis Calderon, who I think might be more of like a 3-4, maybe the ideal position is a 4, like that's the other guy playing down there. But that means KU is going to have a lot of work to do at the center position in the portal. Magoon Guath, somebody we've talked about. It doesn't seem like there's been a lot of KU contact. Maybe there is now. Maybe there is now after you lose Flory. I think that would be a home run if you could go out and get Guath. And to a certain standpoint, like there are certain things Guath does that are better than Flory. Both are potential first-round prospects in the future. There are certain things Flory does better than Guath. I think if you can make that exchange, you'll feel like you at least made a close enough exchange. This opens up maybe a guy like Malik Renaud. I didn't love the idea of bringing in Malik Renaud to play next to Flory, but if you're going to bring in Malik Renaud to play the 5, I'm actually kind of in on that, right? So there's other guys that are at Morez Johnson for Illinois, Quincy Ballard from Wichita State and Florida State before that. There are some interesting pieces at the very least that I think you could bring in, and there's probably going to be more names to pop up, but it just puts even more and more strain now on your budget to bring in a guy at the center position that you're going to have to make that. Now, the long-term impact here is how does this affect roster building? Because I have a very interesting thought on this where it's, I don't know, maybe you won't find it interesting, but I do. We've had a lot of these conversations, and I've brought them up myself, right? And thoughts that I've thought about this, and a lot of people have too. The idea that, it doesn't really make as much sense for Bill Self to build it out of the portal, that Bill Self does his best when he has guys who are in his program that he develops through in his program. The problem that we're getting to with that, and maybe this is a realization for me with this, and we'll see what happens with a guy like Raquise Passmore, right? I know there's been some hinting that maybe he could enter too. Maybe he comes back though and changes this, right? We don't entirely know, at least as of I'm recording right now. Who knows? There might be breaking news that I haven't even seen because I've just been recording this. But point being, it's one thing, and again, this has been my thought that like, okay, Self does better with the players he develops than are in his system than the guys he brings on via transfer. But what if you just can't get guys to stay? Like, and again, is that a little bit of looking in the mirror? Is that a problem you're doing to yourself? Is that just the nature of college basketball today's day and age where you just can't do that? Like you aren't afforded the ability to develop guys in your own roster. And maybe that's the truth of the matter. Maybe there is a little bit of truth that like, unfortunately, if that is Bill Self's strength to be able to do it that way, unfortunately, that strength is just not allowed anymore. It'd be like if you had a guy who was really good at free throw shooting, and then for some reason they were like, we're going to get rid of free throws as a rule, and he was like, I'm not really good at anything else. It's like, oh crap. And that's a little extreme of an analogy because Bill Self is very good at other things too. He's not just good at one thing. But I think that's what Bill Self specializes in. And so maybe this is just Bill Self is going to have to bring in the portal. And it becomes less of he should adjust to the style that's done well for him. And it's going to have to be he has to adjust to the style that hasn't worked best for him, but he's going to have to figure it out. Because if guys like Flory, who were probably making a good amount of money and probably would have made a good amount of money next year, and came into the program with the idea that he could be here a couple years and could develop for a year and sit behind him. And he knew what he was signing up to, getting behind Dickinson and Adams, and that he was going to be one of the stars on this year's team and was set up to be the starting center and play 25, 30 minutes from the University of Kansas, a blue blood. And he is transferring. Kind of hard to control being able to develop players long-term, right? Kind of hard to steer into that. So I guess long-term, this is just the new norm. You're going to have to figure out a way to win in the transfer portal. And is Bill Self built for that? I guess we're going to entirely find out. Zack Clemence is also entering the portal. Let's discuss that next. This episode of the show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling the lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in around a golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. I was actually taking a nap. I was taking a nap. I was up late last night watching college basketball, wake up early with the baby. I was taking a little bit of a nap. Wife wakes me up. Hey, Flory's transferring. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Not just you got to be kidding me because, of the news, but because I was tired. I was taking my nap. Well, it's one way to overcome that. And the way that I'm going to have to now is 5 Hour Energy. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one right now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized with 5 Hour Energy. Well, Zack Clemens is transferring too. And thanks for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks. Make sure to subscribe to the show anywhere that you get it. And don't forget to check out Locked On College Basketball. I want to talk about Clemens as well as the overall center position because now that's multiple centers leaving the program with him and Flory Bidunga.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Thank you again. Check out Locked On College Basketball and get you through the Elite Eight and the Final Four and all that good jazz. So Zach Clemence is also leaving, and this one may be a little more expected than the Flory news, but it obviously compounds together because you were already probably looking for a big man to come up and be your backup big man or be a guy who could play the 4 and the 5 next to Flory. And then Clemence leaves, and it's like, okay, Clemence represented probably the roster spot of a guy who would be your – yeah, he might play 5-10 minutes in this game if you really need him to, if there's foul trouble or an injury or he's playing well that game. And then there's some games he's just going to get a DNP, a do not play. So Clemens leaves first, and it's just, okay, they need to fill that position with, somebody else who can be comfortable in that role, right? The Parker Brown role, I guess, so to speak, although Brown, was a more consistent in the rotation guy because they didn't have that next big, so to speak. But combined now with Bidunga, it makes it so that the masses are there. And just in general, you look at the roster now for KU for next season. So you have Darryn Peterson, you have Marco Jackson coming back as a redshirt sophomore, Jamari McDowell coming back as a redshirt sophomore. Bryson Tiller will be a redshirt freshman. Griffin and Storr, we await their portal decision. Same with Diggy Coit. But let's say all three go. Raquise Passmore, kind of same thing. Samis Calderon coming in as a freshman. That would be 5 you feel certain about, with the other 4 you're waiting on portal decisions. And then Jaden Nickens, I still don't know what's going to happen with the scholarship there. I think you still have one scholarship to give, so instead of being at 15, which is the new rule this year, you'll be at 14, which means you have 9 open spots. There's going to be some high school commits that decommit. In fact, I think I saw one who was like a top 60 the other day, decommitted. Maybe you can add another freshman, or maybe even 2 if you find a diamond in the rough or something at this point in time. But that guarantees, and going back to what I was saying, this is less about at this point, Bill Self needs to go more for high school recruiting and develop guys, because I just don't know how possible that is. And I think we're seeing that right now. He's going to have to fill it out with the portal. And it's going to be less about, can you work to the style that's worked well for you? It's going to be more about, can you adjust to the style and figure it out? Bill Self is still an excellent basketball coach. I don't think that changed after these last 2 seasons. And I think he can figure it out, but obviously he is at the latter stages of his coaching career. And so it makes it a little bit more difficult from that standpoint. We've seen guys leave because of it, right? Does this make it more likely that this could be Bill Self's last season, right? That he's just like, you know what, this sucks having to deal with it. And I wouldn't blame him for it, right? Being like, yeah, this sucks to deal with. I'm going to have one last season with Darryn Peterson and then I'm out. I wouldn't blame him for it. I really wouldn't. And he's been an excellent coach for KU, and that wouldn't change based on, regardless of how things kind of finish here. But there's 2 ways of looking at this now. You do have more opportunity to give out in the portal. You do have more, molding you can do. What exactly do you want at the 5 position? Because as promising as Flory looked, there is the element of okay, but he did struggle on the defensive glass. And at times he would get pushed around. You were going to have to add more weight to him. And at times he did need to play next to another big because of that stuff. Does this give you an opportunity to give you a center who doesn't need those things where you can play a wing at the four? Like, it felt like to me, Kansas was looking more for like a true forward, a true power forward type to play next to Flory, or a 4-5 type to play next to Flory, to match some of his skill set. And now you could at the very least say, hey, we found a center who can hold up defensive rebounding and not get pushed around in the post, where we don't have to, play him as a 4 on the defensive end of the floor. We can play him as a true 5, and now we can go for that wing as a 4 position, right? That is maybe the one like positive thing out of this, that you have a blank slate to mold it exactly how you need it to. It's not, hey, we're going to mold it around these 2 players. It's now we're going to mold it just around Darryn Peterson, and we'll see how they can do that. It adds another chore for Bill Self and company, opens up a little bit of NIL. But yeah, overall, this is very bad news, very sad news, and certainly not fun news in the transfer portal. All right, that'll do it for this episode of the show. If there's more transfers out of the program, we'll get to them at some point here in Locked On Jayhawks. More deep dives coming on other players, more transfer portal news coming in. We'll see what happens for KU, because tumultuous start for the portal season for Bill Self and company. Back next time. Make sure you're subscribed anywhere you get your podcast and on our YouTube page with Locked On Jayhawks.